I'm recording, and I'm going to go ahead and start the webinar and let people in.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and let people get into the Arrow Insight, and then we'll go ahead and get started. But thank you so much for being here. All right. We will just go ahead and get started while people are trickling in. Again, I want to welcome everyone to the Aerospace Industries Association's Aero Insight on AUKUS, U.S. industry and the future of AUKUS, and what it will take to make AUKUS a success. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Emily Hayes. I'm the manager of media relations here. Just a quick few housekeeping items before we get started. We are going to record this and will be up on our YouTube channel later if you happen to miss anything. There is a Q&A chat function for you that is available. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Please note that if you're asking a question, the questions are only available to the panelists. So feel free to ask. We will not reveal who is asking that question. We will try and get to it. If we are unable to get to your question, we can go ahead and follow up with you if you would like us to do so. Just make sure to shoot us an email at the end. With that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Dak Hardwick, the Vice President of International Affairs here at AIA. Dak?
Emily, thank you so much. It's great to have everybody join us today for our webinar on driving success for AUKUS. Before we jump into the conversation here, would like to give everybody an opportunity to meet the members of the AIA International team. These are really the engine of the association, and very proud to have the team members here. Let me first turn it over to Emma Hamilton, and then we'll turn it over to Lizzie Patterson for them to introduce themselves. So Emma, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. My name is Emma Hamilton. I am the Senior Manager for Defense Trade Policy here on the International Affairs team at the Aerospace Industries Association. Before I joined the team, I had a little bit of experience on Capitol Hill. I also worked at DoD on the policy team for Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Island countries. More recently, within my role as the Senior Manager for Defense Trade Policy, I help work a lot of the defense trade issues, such as foreign military sales, industrial base issues, and global supply chain challenges. So really excited to take all of that knowledge and brief you on the activities that we're doing to date here at AIA. But I'll pass it over to Lizzie to introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Emma. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lizzie Patterson, and I am the Manager of Export Control Policy here at AIA. My portfolio complements Emma's of defense trade by covering things not just related to export controls, but also technology disclosure and security, as well as sanctions. Prior to my time at AIA, I had several years of experience working with US and elected officials, primarily in Europe, focused on political party building and development. So complement Emma's work in Australia with some work in Europe ahead of our AUKUS issues. I'll pass it over back to Dak now.
Okay, Emma, Lizzie, thank you so much. So before we jump into the AUKUS conversation, I want to give everybody just a quick overview of the association. First, we have about 50 full-time employees here. We're based in Arlington, Virginia. We represent over 330 U.S. aerospace and defense manufacturers. So we have the ability to see at every part of the global aerospace and defense supply chain, we have a member that sits in one of those parts of the supply chain, all the way from the small suppliers all the way to the largest original equipment manufacturers. So when we talk about the state of the industry or understanding how the industry is impacted by a variety of different challenges, we can certainly speak with some authority because we have members that represent at least one part of the supply chain all the way up and down. So we're very proud about that at the association. We focus on really four main issues from the policy perspective: civil aviation, defense, space, and then international trade. We are also a standards holder. We hold the standards for the National Aerospace Standards. We employ full-time engineers here. So for those small and medium-sized companies that need standards to manufacture their aerospace and defense products, we're proud to be a standards holder. And then we support the international air and trade shows. For many of you, you might be attending the Farnborough International Air Show that's coming up in about a week's time. Emma and I will both be on the ground in Farnborough. So if you have an opportunity to come by the air show, we would love to be able to see you. So with that, that's just the basic bit of the association here. Let me jump right into the conversation that you all joined us for today here, and that's AUKUS. For those that don't necessarily have a good grasp of what AUKUS is, we wanted to give you a 50,000-foot level. AUKUS is a strategic partnership between the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia for the purposes of regional security. It is a security partnership. But it's one that is underpinned by the industrial security partnership that we are developing between the three countries. It's broken down into two pillars. The first pillar is known as Pillar 1. It is going to be Australia's purchase of Virginia-class submarines, conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarines. And then Pillar 2 is an opportunity to develop advanced technologies between the three countries for the purposes, again, of regional security and also larger technology security technology sharing opportunities. For Pillar 1, the original reason why AUKUS was announced, I think it's important, this is an important point for everybody to take away, is that the sale of the Virginia-class submarine is the first time that the Virginia-class submarine will ever be sold to a non-US buyer. The Virginia-class submarine was developed only for the United States Navy, and now we have added a new country that's going to be a buyer of the Virginia-class submarines. And so that's something that underpins the entire AUKUS perspective, because the Virginia-class submarine was never intended for export. So all the processes and procedures necessary to export arguably a crown jewel item to a partner, there are lots of challenges associated with deciding to export a non-exportable item. And that's one of the things that we've been working on here at the association to ensure that the processes and procedures necessary for U.S. industry to comply with export control laws related to the submarine are in place. It certainly has been a very interesting journey, very tough hill to climb, continues to be a hill to climb, but we're excited about the opportunity here at the association to support Pillar 1. For Pillar 2, it's an opportunity to develop advanced technologies between the three countries in some real critical areas for warfighting in the 21st century. Hypersonics, undersea, cyber, these types of new technologies that are still, some of them are just still in their infancy, are really something that we wanted to share, and the governments decided that they wanted to share with themselves between and among the three partners. As you can imagine, when you start to do export of high technology, there are significant rules and regulations associated with governing those particular exports. So it's something that we continue to focus on. It's one of the reasons why the industry dove into AUKUS pretty heavily, because in order for the security partnership to be successful, the industrial partnership has to absolutely align with the security partnership. So all of the implementation necessary for export controls, for technology sharing, for congressional notifications, all of those things have to be in place and are critical to the success of AUKUS. That's why industry has asked for an increased voice in the AUKUS security partnership, because without industry as part of the conversation, the security partnership will probably not realize its full potential unless you have industry at the table. So it's one of the reasons why we have been engaged with this for so many years. We're excited about the opportunity, and with that, what I want to do is I want to send the slides over to Emma and have her talk about AIA's advocacy on AUKUS in order to advance the overall technology security environment for U.S. industry. And so Emma, go right ahead.
Thanks, Dak. So following the AUKUS announcement, it was clear that industrial integration was needed for the success of the partnership. To achieve this objective, our members recognized that policy and regulatory changes were required. There was also recognition that industry feedback on those policy and regulatory recommendations or proposals would be vital to ensure that AUKUS went from concept to reality. Leadership on what success looked like from an industry perspective was something that we realized was a gap and that was required moving forward to ensure that the partnership was successful and fully utilized by industry. In 2023, AI assumed this leadership role by releasing a white paper called Operationalizing the AUKUS Partnership in coordination with ADS and AI Group, our counterparts in Australia and the United Kingdom. This came from a recognition that in order to be successful, cooperation would have to happen across all three industrial bases, and there needed to be a unified voice on what industry needed across all three governments. The paper recommended several items that have led us where I would say we are today. And to date, the government has taken those recommendations and made them central to the implementation strategy that we currently see in front of us. So a couple of those recommendations I wanted to highlight in particular. The first is the AUKUS Advanced Capabilities Forum that we interact with on 3 times a year. And then the second is statutory support for an AUKUS exemption, both under ITAR and the EAR. From these policy recommendations and AIA's subsequent advocacy, AIA saw the FY24 NDAA usher in a landmark shift in export control policy, authorizing an exemption for both Australia and the UK. But we quickly realized that while the authorization for the exemption was complete, we needed to turn to implementation to ensure industry could fully utilize and see the value of the full partnership that AUKUS provides. Since that time, AI has worked closely with our government interlocutors to include DDTC, for example, to represent the industry perspective and ensure full utilization. This included providing feedback to each of the proposed rules from State Department and the Commerce Department. This also included taking a leading role in the AUKUS Advanced Capabilities Forum, testifying before the House Foreign Affairs Committee on what was required for AUKUS Pillar 2 to be successful, organizing high-level meetings with senior Australian, UK, and US officials, and remaining to be a key interlocutor with those officials moving forward to advance the partnership. Emily, can I have you move to the second slide? So AUKUS will only be successful if each nation has a modernized workforce, regulatory structures that are nimble and flexible, and clear demand signals, and iterative industry engagement. To meet the AUKUS objectives, we must have a defense-friendly trade regulatory system across all three governments to help all three industrial bases cooperate more seamlessly. These systems must not only be nimble, but they must be comparable, ensuring cooperation is coupled with the highest protection of our shared technologies, something that I know all three governments are committed to and industry is as well. To deliver on Pillar 1 specifically, we must have a strong industrial base that invests and utilizes the workforce of all three nations. But investment is key. In April, Congress passed the supplemental foreign aid package, but more must be done in order to ensure we have the workforce and requirements to ensure industrial cooperation. Investment expands to Pillar 2, and that includes demand signals for industry. Demand signals for technology development and cooperation on AUKUS projects must also come for industry and are necessary in order for industry to participate and fully utilize the intention of the partnership. The AUKUS Innovation Challenge, released earlier this year, was a great start, but guidance, funding, and requirements must be clear and consistent for each of the projects for industry to use them. Finally, industry engagement must be conducted and feedback considered on an iterative basis to ensure full participation and utilization of the AUKUS exemptions moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lizzie to talk a little bit more about the export control regime and some of the stuff we've done.
Thanks, Emma. As we've highlighted, trade remains at the center of all AUKUS activities, and AIA has focused its primary efforts on providing critical feedback to the US, UK, and Australian governments to ensure changes to the defense trade regime work for industry. Following the authorization of the ITAR exemption in the fiscal year 24 NDAA and the release of the draft rule in May, AIA quickly got to work to develop robust and comprehensive written feedback. In addition to formal submission, AIA has briefed AUKUS partner governments and convened industry directly with government during the rulemaking process. Our top-line message has been clear, in that the AUKUS exemption must prioritize flexibility and reflect the comparable systems of control in Australia and the UK. AIA outlined recommendations from industry and submitted it to the Directorate of Defense Trade Controls, who oversees the ITAR. These recommendations follow 3 general themes. The first is to streamline the excluded technologies list. AIA advocated that while technology security is fundamental and a critical element to maintaining our technological advantage, to promote closer technological collaboration with our allies and partners, the excluded technology list must only contain the most sensitive technologies or otherwise risk countering the AUKUS objectives. Thus, AIA recommended that the ETL be revised to appropriately reflect the objectives of Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, and that mechanisms be created to field questions regarding ETL compliance and incorporate iterative industry feedback. Second, we recommended to simplify the authorized user process. As the exemption will require authorized users be registered by the three governments, that process must be simple to incentivize industry utilization and mitigate unnecessary burdens placed on small and sub-tier companies in the supply chain. Further, data regarding the authorized users must be easy to access and regularly updated, especially as suppliers continue to be added to the supply chain. Finally, we recommended to expand transfer territory to reflect security realities. The draft exemption as written limits the scope of transfers within and between the physical territories of Australia, the UK, and the US, thereby restricting the delivery of maintenance, repair, and overhaul, and other critical services. To ensure that critical security is maintained in the region, authorized transfer territory must be expanded to the armed forces of Australia, the UK, and the US, and any registered entities deployed to support such armed forces. At the center of AIA's comprehensive list of recommendations was the argument that the exemption relies on comparable systems of control across all three governments as authorized by Congress. This negates the need for an overly complex and new licensing requirements that would deter industry from ultimately leveraging it. To summarize, the AUKUS ITAR exemption must create an enabling environment that ensures the three nations rapidly deliver on pillars 1 and 2 for the warfighter. The three export control systems must be comparable and simple to navigate to make it easy for industry to integrate the exemption regulation into their existing trade compliance processes. Emily, next slide, please. We expect an update to the AUKUS ITAR exemption to be shared in about mid-August. In the meantime, our team is working to advocate for a forward-looking, industry-friendly regulatory environment, and it's continuing to be ongoing. We continue to emphasize that industry is critical to the success of AUKUS, and more work must be done to ensure that success. Currently, we're focusing on a series of efforts that will ensure industry is able to engage in AUKUS priorities seamlessly with government. First, AIA is advocating for the modernization of the Technology Security and Foreign Disclosure Export Control process, otherwise known as TSFID. TSFID is primarily used by the Department of Defense to evaluate military technology exports and involves various DoD offices to review and approve the release of technology. This process is incredibly complex and is a key driver for delays in the defense trade system. If the US is to partner with Australia and the UK to deliver advanced technology capabilities, the TSFID process must be modernized. The fiscal year 24 NDA also included an initiative to reform and improve the TSFID policies and processes, and AIA has been working with key stakeholders as this amendment is being implemented. This modernization effort is critical to the export control regime and the success of AUKUS. While the ITAR exemption is a key step to streamline trade with AUKUS partners, TSFID actually has the ability to counter this objective and roadblock trade if it's not appropriately addressed. We recently completed a white paper at AIA detailing recommendations to support this modernization effort, and we will be releasing it in the coming weeks. Similarly, AIA will continue to advocate with our partners on the Hill to reconsider the role of congressional notifications in defense trade authorization of AUKUS. Given the congressional authorization of a licensing exemption in the fiscal year 24 NDAA, AIA is exploring additional pathways to remove the need for congressional notifications for trade agreements of a certain value or for the manufacturing of significant military equipment. By removing this additional step, trade with our closest allies and partners will be better situated to remain on schedule and without unnecessary burdens placed on industry. Finally, while AUKUS aims to integrate the industrial bases of Australia, the US, and the UK, the defense industry ultimately relies on a global supply chain and industrial bases with other key allies and partners. It's important for the AUKUS partner nations to consider holistic investment into the global supply chain and how these investments can better support key partners outside of AUKUS to mitigate supply chain vulnerabilities. While planning the implementation of Pillars 1 and 2, it's important for the partner nations to consider these vulnerabilities and risks closely throughout the supply chain. AUKUS is still clearly in the early stages of implementation, but the progress thus far promises to spearhead the next generation of collective security partnerships. AIA is eager to continue to be an instrumental voice supporting industry and interagency partners in this pathway of success. On that note, that wraps up our formal presentation of the work done thus far on AUKUS, and I believe we will be now turning it over to some question and answers.
Okay, Emma and Lizzie, thank you so much. You've given everybody here the comprehensive view of what we've done over the last 18 months or so. Opportunity for everybody to ask a few questions here. There actually is one in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up now, and I actually will take this question. So it's something that's I think on top of mind for a lot of people here. The question is what is the view of a future of Pillar 1 under a potential new Trump administration? I think from the association's perspective, we don't necessarily have a view there. What I would like to remind everybody is that over the last 18 months, the significant amount of investment that's gone into the submarine industrial base, either through the Congress or through the inputs from the Australian government, has significantly changed the nature of the submarine industrial base to make it more robust, to ensure that the supply chain security that we need in the submarine industrial base exists, and that it ensures that the long-term industrial base necessary to develop the submarines, whether it's the Virginia class, whether it's Columbia class, or for the Virginia class, it's going to be sold to Australia. The significant amount of investment that's gone into the submarine industrial base over the last number of years is really generational investments. We, from the industry side, welcome those investments, and they're going to be critical for our country moving forward. So the next question here, let me go ahead and take that one here. A recent Bloomberg article quoted several commenters critical of AUKUS implementation so far. What's our view on the implementation? Great question. Let me just go ahead and say we're not done yet. The implementation is ongoing. The robust work that we are doing with our friends at the Department of State, the Department of Commerce, and the Department of Defense is something that continues to be ongoing. What we would advise everybody that's on the line here, we think that there is a need for a little bit of patience. The generational change that we had in AUKUS happened in truly lightning speed in terms of Washington time. We went from not necessarily knowing what AUKUS was to a potential exemption from the ITAR for the UK and Australia in about 24 months. That consensus in Washington truly came together very quickly. The implementation is ongoing. We think it's going to be an enduring implementation going forward, and it's something from the industry side that we welcome. It's one of the reasons why we continue to insist on industry engagement, industry input into that process. We have been told many times that if the rule doesn't work for industry, then it just doesn't work. Well, we have been providing that type of input back to the State Department and back to our friends at the DoD and the Commerce Department to talk about how operationalizing some of the rules may or may not impact them. That's the role of the association here, and we're proud to do it. So with a very robust experts in the export control compliance and trade compliance sides of our member companies, we have that historical insight to provide that feedback. Have a question here on what are the next legislative steps for AUKUS based on the current recommendations and industry view. Let me go back to something that Lizzie said earlier about congressional notifications. So as we look at the need for congressional notifications for the UK and Australia very specifically, what we want to make sure is we're able to move items that Australia and the UK need for the purposes of warfighting, move them through the US system as much as possible. We're going to go back to our friends in Congress and ask them to think about perhaps a different structure by which they do congressional notifications. We certainly don't want to take away Congress's oversight responsibility for this. Absolutely don't want to do that. But we do want to do is have a conversation about, is there a better way to do it for these two countries, especially under the AUKUS regime? We think that's important for us to consider. We welcome that conversation that we have with our congressional, with our congressional friends. Let's see here. Let's do a few questions here. Oh, yeah. So there's a question here about expanding AUKUS, whether it's Japan or whether it's Canada. I would say that from a industry perspective, the security partnership and the industrial partnership are linked. If the governments decide that they want to add Japan or Canada or any other country to that, that's a decision for the governments. But from the industry perspective, it's important for us to remember something, that the aerospace and defense sector is global in nature. Canada remains the largest import origin and export destination country for US aerospace and defense products. The Japanese have a significant manufacturing capability that is critical to the aerospace and defense business. So from an industry perspective, we need these partners in our industrial base in order to support the AUKUS environment. If a decision is made by the governments in order to add them to the security partnership, then industry will adjust. But from an industrial perspective, these partners, these countries that have significant manufacturing capabilities, they have outstanding workforces. They are long partners with the U.S. aerospace and defense industry. From an industrial perspective, these countries are very important to the U.S. aerospace and defense industry. Okay. Looking through here, some additional questions. What challenges do you anticipate in the integration of economies when ITAR exemptions are issued, overcoming cultural pushback to buying foreign products, etc.? This is a great question. One of the things that we've had very extensive conversations, not only with our own government, but also with the UK and the Australian government, is the need to continue to integrate foreign parts and components into overall US systems for the purposes of ensuring that we have a global supply chain that continues to be resilient, secure, etc. The introduction of those particular items is not necessarily something that should be opposed, because what we see is that we need these parts and components from countries all over the world. Some of the best manufacturing that we have in the world is in the UK. It is also in Australia, but it's also in other countries as well. The aerospace and defense community sources from countries around the world, particularly focused on those partners and allies that we have long-standing partnerships with, long-standing industrial partnerships with. The top five countries that we tend to source from are the UK, Canada, Japan, Germany, and France. Those countries continue to be the leading countries, not only import origin, but export destination countries for US aerospace and defense equipment, whether it's full products or whether it's parts and components. So those countries continue to be absolutely critical. Under the AUKUS opportunity here, we now get to add Australia's industrial-based capability into the US in a way that these other countries have traditionally been part of the US aerospace and defense sector. So these are just some of the challenges that we run into on the industry side in order to implement AUKUS within a community of AUKUS. But that community of AUKUS is going to be supported by a global supply chain that we're going to continue to want to support. Let's see here. A few questions here about changes in government also in the UK as well. I think from an industry perspective, we continue to take an evaluation of where the new Labour government is. So no real opinion there other than they're just getting themselves up to speed about how they're going to approach certain things. Some of the public statements that have been talked about from the incoming Labour government seem to be very supportive. But from an industry perspective, we just continue to follow that and don't necessarily have an opinion about the direction there, other than to say that we're just monitoring what they say. But overall, it looks relatively positive about the need for the continue to focus on the AUKUS partnership. Okay, let's see here. I am seeing not any additional questions here. Well, let me ask this. Let me go back to Emma and come back to Lizzie. As we've had this conversation today, if you had something that you would want to have everybody here take away from our conversation, what would you want them to remember from this conversation? So, Emma, why don't we come to you first?
So I think the one thing that people should take away is that there's strong bipartisan support for AUKUS, and I think that's been displayed throughout the last year of the implementation process for this for this implementation period, that the work is still ongoing, and that in order to make sure that industry is able to fully utilize the exemption and be a full player within the partnership, that we need to focus our efforts on implementation and making sure that we get the regulatory and policy structures correct, and that industry feedback in that process is crucial moving forward. Over to you, Lizzie.
I would definitely echo what Emma said about bipartisan support, and that was very clear with the amendments that were in the fiscal year 24 NDAA. But to expand on that, I think that it's very clear also that the US, Australian, and UK governments clearly see industry as a key stakeholder, and they recognize that without industry support and buy-in into AUKUS, including the ITAR exemption and any other steps to implementation, they know that AUKUS will not be a success. And additionally, on top of that, and I have the privilege of saying this as somebody that just joined the team in January of this year and seeing the hard work that Dak and Emma did back all the way starting in late 2022 and into 2023, AIA truly has been a leading voice for industry and has been able to do some great advocacy that has led to real results. And I feel very privileged to be on a team that's continuing to participate in that advocacy and being a leading voice for industry.
Okay. So looking through the questions here, no additional questions I think that we can address here on the webinar. So Emily, I think what we're going to do is go ahead and close everything out. Let me invite all the members that have joined us today. You are more than welcome to reach out to us at any time to talk about this or anything else that the association is working on. I would like to flag something that Lizzie did mention at the end of her presentation. AI has a white paper that it has generated with the members' input on modernization of the technology security and foreign disclosure process at the DoD. Those that are on the line should anticipate the association will release that paper in the coming days. We're excited about the opportunities there. It's a process that we believe is necessary for AUKUS success, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have a conversation with not only our government stakeholders, but our partner and ally stakeholders as well. So you should anticipate that coming out. And with that, one last check through the questions here. Looks like we've reached the end of the questions, so appreciate everybody joining today. Again, Dak Hardwick from the U.S. Aerospace and Defense, U.S. Aerospace Industries Association, Emma Hamilton, and Lizzie Patterson as well. You can get our contact information on the AIA website, aia-aerospace.org. And as our colleague Emily Hayes said, this will be part of the YouTube channel for the Aerospace Industries Association. Sure, you're more welcome to come back anytime and look through the comments here. But with that, why don't we close today? Thank everybody for joining us today. It's great to see everybody. And for those of you that are traveling to the United Kingdom for the Farnborough International Air Show, safe travels, and we hope to see you there at the air show. Thank you all very much for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody.